So good morning and welcome to the Exit Experts free webinar on the topic of how to boost your business valuation. In a minute, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, Sean Hutchinson, but right now I'd like to run through just a few housekeeping details. To the right of your screen, you'll see an orange box with an arrow just over here. If you click on that box at the bottom, you'll see a box that's headed chat. And if you've got a question, the box below that is where you type in to ask a question. We invite you to ask questions at any time. All attendees will be muted during this presentation except for the two speakers, myself and Sean Hutchinson. So if anyone can't hear me or can't see my screen, please type a message in the bottom box here right away. Doesn't seem like anybody's putting anything in there, so we can get started. Okay, now I'd like to welcome Sean Hutchinson, who's attending live from San Francisco, USA. We're very lucky to have Sean here today because he's a leading business valuation specialist in the US. Good morning and welcome to the Exit Experts free webinar on the topic of how to boost your business valuation. Sean, are you there?
I am.
Okay, I'm just going to give our audience a little bit of information about you because you've got a fairly impressive history here. So in introducing you, Sean Hutchinson is the Managing Director of Fortunato Hutchinson. It's a middle market investment banking and business advisory firm located in San Francisco, California. Sean was educated with a master's degree from Miami University of Ohio and is one of approximately 150 certified exit planning advisors practicing worldwide. He chairs the Professional Standards Committee of the Exit Planning Institute, an international membership association located in Chicago, Illinois, and serves on 2 private company boards. Sean's impressive experience advising privately held companies spans capital raising, competitive strategy, growth and expansion, strategic planning, value creation, governance, market positioning, training and knowledge management, restructuring, recapitalization, partner buy-sell agreements, acquisitions, and exit planning. His most outstanding achievements as CEO of the world's largest real estate advisory firm, Integra Resources, resulted in him doubling it in size through multiple acquisitions and organic growth. He tripled revenues by creating worldwide operating and marketing alliances, plus proprietary technologies developed to create overwhelming competitive advantages for the company. At the time, the company valuation was in excess of $100 million. So at the time, the company valuation was in excess of $100 million US. Sean, that's quite a history. Very impressive. Sean, are you there?
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate that.
Okay.
I am. Yes. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And on top of that, you're a hell of a nice guy. That's my experience. Somebody actually asked me, why have you invited somebody from San Francisco to speak? And let me just explain to you that earlier this year I was attending an intensive MBA program for exit planning in the US in Chicago, and Sean was one of the lecturers there. He was by far one of the most accomplished and experienced speakers throughout the whole program, and I had the opportunity to work with Sean for 3 days in his practice in San Francisco. So I got to know him a little bit, and I can absolutely attest that this guy, what he doesn't know about boosting your business valuation really isn't worth knowing.
Thank you, Lee. I hope I can live up to that. I appreciate it.
I know that you can. I know that you can. Now, Before we get started, Sean, I'd just like to give our attendees a preview agenda of what we're going to discuss. And the first of these is the levers that you can control to maximise your business valuation. We're going to talk about the 6 risk factors that you'll want to overcome and 3 proven methods to increase your business earnings, plus the 5 ways to increase your business acquisition attractiveness. And one incredibly simple thing you'll want to do immediately to dramatically boost your business valuation. You'll also have a chance to determine how on track you are to boost your valuation, boost your business valuation. So, for those of you who do know me and for those who don't know me very well, my entire professional focus is on strategic planning for business to ensure they exit with all the profits they deserve. The whole reason for running this session today is to assist our audience to proceed with the end in mind. If you're in business that you hope to one day sell, you'll want to start thinking like a buyer as early on in the process as possible. So boosting your business valuation is a very crucial part of it to implement if you're to profit the way you'd always hoped. So Sean, if you're ready, please tell us what are the essential actions that allow proprietors to boost the market value of their businesses?
Okay, so at a high level, we really have 3 things that we can do, 3 main areas that will affect the market valuation of a business, which are you can increase your earnings, you can reduce your risk, and you can increase your acquisition attractiveness, which we can also think of as a way to stage the business for a high-value exit. So all 3 of those are really equally important. I don't make a distinction. I wouldn't rank one above another or prioritize one above another. The trick here is to be able to do all 3 of them at the same time over a period that makes sense for your business.
Okay, I've just lost my keys. So Sean, we've only got 45 minutes to cover these today, which is a lot to ask of you, particularly as there are whole MBA programs on these areas. But we're going to give it a go. So can I ask you to broaden on these, please?
Absolutely.
So can we examine the first point, increased earnings? So it may seem fairly obvious to our audience. Is there anything in particular you'd like to say about how to increase earnings?
Well, instinctively it does seem obvious, doesn't it? I mean, I think everybody who's looking to increase the value of their business is looking to increase their earnings. And it's a very critically important point, but it also has a lot of nuances. So let's kind of drill down a little bit. At a high level within this category of increasing your earnings, there's really only 3 ways you can do it. You can increase your sales, increase your revenues, you can lower your cost of goods sold, and you can control your operating expenses. So it's a very straightforward thing to think about until you get down beyond that. So we have to think about increasing earnings as not just driving top-line growth, and this is a mistake I think that a lot of business owners make. They want to drive growth in their business, they want to see the top line growing. But you also have to have behind it a really disciplined operating, what I'll call an operating ecosystem, right? So that's the holistic view of the business and all of its activities, its entire ecosystem. So what I've found is that many businesses try to drive value through increasing their revenue, which misses a key point, and that is each dollar of revenue that comes into a business has to be profitable revenue. And furthermore, the business has to prove that its strategies for increasing earnings are sticky. And let me talk about what I mean by sticky. So what I mean by that is that any gain in earnings has to be planned. You have to demonstrate that you planned for it, that you actually tested for it, and that ultimately it's sustainable. Let me go back to my experience as CEO of Integra. We had 52 offices in North America, and each one of them ran their own profit and loss statement, their own balance sheet. I would do a check-in with them at the end of each quarter, at the end of each year, and I would ask the managing director in those offices, how did you do this year? Let's talk about your performance. and they would say, well, I had a good year, really pleased with our performance, and I'd say, okay, what were the metrics? Well, at the end of the day, it became, at least early on in the development of the company, it was, well, I had money left over in the bank at the end of the year. I said, okay, fine, that's a decent metric. It's always good news. But tell me if you can repeat it next year. Is it sticky? How did you do it? And if you don't know how you do it, if it just turned out to be an accidental benefit, then it's actually not boosting business value. Right? So achieving stickiness really requires a lot of discipline at every level of the organization, and it also requires a kind of insight that's based on objective performance measurement and what I would call evidence-based strategic planning, which is that nothing happens in a business that's really based on opinion or conjecture. It's really about metrics and evidence that are driving decision making.
So what you're
we
saying,
can drill down
Sean,
a little bit further into some of these strategies.
Okay, so what you're saying is we don't just want to increase any old sales. We need to work with the sales that will really add value to our company.
That's absolutely right. I mean, we can talk about economic value a little bit when we get into risk reduction, but there are some ways. Most people think that increasing sales is really just about selling better, and there's no question that that's important. I mean, you could deploy your sales force in a different way, or it might be a pricing issue, or maybe it's a client service issue. But there are also other ways that you can increase sales that I think are kind of invisible, and I want to bring those out. So let's talk about 4, and then I'll drill down on 2.
Okay.
You can enter niche markets, right? So going into a niche market, identifying a niche opportunity, going into a niche market actually opens up a kind of opportunity that most businesses do not look for, perhaps. They don't look for that kind of focus, and they don't really know how to exploit it. So it's an important opportunity that you can get into. It also doesn't take as much capital. It doesn't take as many resources in order to exploit fully into that particular market. So that can increase your sales. You're more visible. You can patent new products, or at least introduce new processes that give you a competitive edge. You certainly should be looking at launching innovative products, right? Everybody's going to pay attention to that. And if you are a business with enough heft and capital, you actually could go out and consolidate your competitors, so you could acquire revenue by acquiring businesses and merging them into your own. Let's drill down a little bit into the niche market thing. So really what niche market will do for you is help you build your brand and use your resources efficiently, right? So if there's a takeaway from this, I want everybody to kind of think about how strong brands really build value. See, these are the intangibles that people may miss, but they do translate into real value. I mean, think about Google and Apple. These are some of the strongest brands in the world, and although they certainly have revenue, Facebook is a good example. Facebook doesn't have that much revenue yet, but what an incredible brand, and what's the market valuation on that company? I mean, it's something just really stupid compared to the amount of money that it brings in. So,
Sean,
if you're in a niche market, I mean, the whole idea behind niche is.
Sean, I was just going to say that can seem easy for larger companies, but what about for our small to medium-sized or mid-range operating companies?
Right. So I think it's just as important. So the intangible factor of branding and the brand equity that's associated with that, the communication with the market, the positioning of the business, all of those types of investments, that intangible factor on business valuation shows up in what we would call goodwill, right? And you would be surprised. Goodwill is really the difference between the book value of the assets of the business and the actual valuation of the business. It's all that space in between, and brand equity is a big piece of that. It's especially important for professional services businesses, which may not have a significant asset base, right? So this is the way that you generate value in those types of businesses. So the whole idea of brand equity is really predicated on an ability to dominate a space and really build an incredibly strong bond with customers. So you're trying to capture the highest value, most loyal customers. You've got to be the best in your chosen space, or alternatively, maybe you have to be a definer of a market. And then you've really also got to have total command of your related operational execution. So I think, the lesson here is that too many companies try to offer too much to the market and end up really diluting their best products and services. So there's a question of creating economic value. It's kind of this, they're they're seeing one side rise and one side fall, and they're just not making good headway. They're out of balance. And I think in those situations, business value really evaporates as that discipline deteriorates. And we'll talk throughout this session about discipline. You'll hear me harp on it, and I can't say enough about how it drives business value. So, and then the second one, let's talk a little bit about introducing new products to create barriers to entry. This is something that I do think smaller, mid-sized businesses miss, either because they don't have the money to do it or don't think it's something that they can do, but I think that's incorrect. But one reflection of the lack of investment in this area is really, if you looked at the operating budget, the annual operating budget for mid-market or smaller businesses, you won't find a line that, in most cases, you won't find a line that's devoted to research and development. It just won't show up.
No.
Maybe you get around to it when you think about it, but you don't find a line item. So, and I think a lot of us also don't really think about how to uniquely brand or productize our services. So it begins to look like we're just a commodified player in a very diverse marketplace, and we're not
In some ways,
defending our place.
Sean, would it be fair to say that in some ways a small to medium-sized company really has the upper hand on that, because they can become very specialised in one area and outdo their larger competitors
Absolutely.
in the space?
I think that's true. Capital matters, unfortunately, and in today's economy worldwide, I think it's very hard, to get the kind of capital that you need in order to make certain investments. But you can be wise about it, and you can also be quite nimble. So, you've got to sort of walk this interesting line between being super disciplined and being super nimble, and that's a hard thing to do. And again, you have to sort of build it into your ecosystem. It's got to be not just a way of operating, it's got to be a way of thinking, it's got to be a way of making decisions. So if you can develop that true, let's call it intellectual property, regardless of your size or type of business, then you're naturally going to throw boulders into the path of your competition. And that's very important, because barriers are really high-grade advantages that create, in the end, outsized valuations when they're successful. So those are things that you might not think are necessarily related to increasing your sales, but they actually are.
Okay, thanks.
On the second point, if we talk about lowering, yeah, sure. If we talk about lowering the cost of goods sold, I'm going to once again use the word that everybody will hate by the end of the webinar, and that's discipline. So
Australians
really
don't like discipline much.
Here. Well, neither do I. I mean, it's no fun, right? But it's really necessary. It's key to embrace it. So you need to develop economies of scale. In order to really lower your cost of goods, you need to develop economies of scale. You need to strengthen your supply chain if you're in manufacturing, if you've got to get raw materials in. And then you need to increase efficiencies in your processes. And I would say that's multidimensional, but it's in production, it's in distribution, it's in services, and it's also in labor utilization, right? So there's a lot of metrics that you're managing there. And then you've got to implement what I would consider to be really cutting-edge cost control systems. So you've got to have some real-time management, data management in there, so that you can make good decisions about cost control on the COGS side. And none of that really happens by accident. You can't piecemeal this kind of thing together. So you need to take the time, you need to devote the resources, and you have to be consistent and diligent in order to get it right and make it stick. And then this third area is, controlling operating expenses. Maybe a lot of us have a sense of this in our own businesses, and we've also seen other people's businesses, but I consistently see businesses that are really overloaded with unnecessary expenses, and I think many of them just don't realize it. Admittedly, if you've got long-time employees and they become your friends, cutting people, cutting their salaries or cutting employment is a very difficult thing to do. It's emotional. Mm-hmm. But you've really got to take I think a very objective, dispassionate, in some cases, view. So I see a lack of operating budgets. I'm amazed how many businesses I talk to that just don't even have an operating budget put together. They just kind of, play it by ear as they go. And they don't have any monitoring systems. So as a result, important data kind of don't get tracked, and trends are missed, and things, I guess, just get loose. And it becomes kind of a laissez-faire reality, which it just becomes embedded in the business. It goes unquestioned. It's just the way we operate, and we never really think twice about it. But from a buyer's point of view, that's a huge red flag. If you can't run the business, the cost side of the business, in a disciplined way, then that's just an admission of risk, I would say, right up front. The valuation is going to be discounted, and I think buyers are looking for businesses that are just better run than their peers, and there's not much tolerance for anything less these days. A lot of scrutiny on that area.
Okay, Sean, can I actually ask you to explain the 6 risks that must be overcome in order to boost a business valuation?
Absolutely. So I think you have a slide on that lists them. So the 6 areas that we're talking about here are to increase. You need to look at the economic value risk in your business, and this is a fairly complex area. It's important to focus on it, but you've got capital risk, you've got economic risk, and you've also got strategic and operational risk. So it's kind of a mixed bag of things that you have to manage. I would argue that most businesses need to kind of start on the simple end of the scale and move toward the more complex, which would be on the economic value capital risk side. So we've got looking at your economic value, the activities that produce economic value. We've got your capital base, overcoming and mitigating specific risks, either industry risks or business risks, and those are a tremendous factor in any valuation, especially in a privately held business. So they're specific to the situation. You've got to work to create a competitive, efficient operation, diversifying your customer base, and also building a management structure. So I want the key takeaway here is really that risk reduction is as significant a contributor to enhanced business value as increasing your earnings. So the two can't be decoupled. I want to just drill down into 2 of the simpler ones here, and we're going to talk about diversifying the customer base and building a management structure. So if you look at valuation, business valuers are looking at not just what the sort of hypothetical value of the business is, but they're also looking at particular factors that may discount the value of the business and increase the return that a buyer would expect because they're taking on more risk, if that makes sense. So these are 2 areas that really have a dramatic impact on the value of a business, negatively and also positively if they're handled correctly. So customer concentration. This is an interesting area because it sometimes comes as a surprise to our clients that having a really big client that represents a significant piece of their revenue is actually a disadvantage in the valuation. So, most business owners are pretty excited to get the big fish.
Yes,
right?
that's right.
They love that. I mean, it can be a significant milestone in the development of a business when you jump from having, relatively small clients and you're sort of scratching by wondering where your next dollar is going to come from. Then all of a sudden you get a big kind of, quote-unquote institutional level client. It's a big feather in your cap, a lot of revenue, but all of a sudden that client in and of itself represents 50, 60, 70% of your revenue. That, from a buyer's perspective, is a huge risk. And you have to work hard to keep that instinct to sort of bias toward the larger clients in check as a manager, and constantly try to diversify your customer base so that no client or customer represents, at the very least, more than 25% of your revenue, and preferably no more than 10. So that's a tough one, right? You've got tension between what the business owner likes to see in their business and what the buyer or investor would look for in terms of risk. Then let's talk about forming a management structure. This is particularly difficult in small to middle-sized businesses, but it's absolutely necessary. So if the business doesn't have a management layer in it and is completely reliant on the owner to function, then the valuation is going to drop precipitously, and I think we all understand why. The buyer or investor would not understand what happens after the owner leaves the business. They would see that as a risk. So
it's
I
amazing
think you have to
how
have at
many
least one backup manager.
Yeah, it's amazing how many small to medium-sized players, excuse me, are so reliant on their head honcho, and that they're just failing to see that nobody wants to buy a business that is reliant on that one person. The risk
Well,
involved for
that's
them
absolutely
taking
right.
over, that if they're keeping
Right,
everything in
right.
their
Well,
mind. So
that's right. In many ways, it's operating as a sole proprietorship, even though it may be incorporated. And there's a training problem. There's a knowledge management problem. That points to a systems level problem. You know, there may be. You don't want a business that has a general with 1,000 lieutenants. You want backup managers who really know what they're doing functionally and can step into the shoes of the owner. They're not replacements necessarily, but they can step into the shoes of the owner on short notice. So those are really two that I think are particularly important.
Sean, can you just enlighten us a little bit more on why it's so important for people in business today to get their act together on this front and boosting their business valuation?
Sure. Well, you know, it's interesting. This is, and I think everyone probably knows this, but this is an extremely crowded marketplace, and that's essentially because we have moved into the age of the baby boomer. So here in the United States, about 65% of our privately held businesses are owned by baby boomers who started turning 62 in 2008. That was the first wave, and they'll be moving through the system for the next 18 years or so. And their businesses are all going to sort of crowd onto the market. They're not very well prepared, typically, for ownership or management transitions. They've kind of left it until the last minute in many cases. And I understand in Australia that percentage of baby boomer owned businesses is much higher. I think it's probably 96 or 97%, isn't that
That's
right?
right. It's very high.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. So what that means in the United States, at least, that's probably 13, 14, 15 million businesses that will come onto the market in a relatively short period of time.
It's about
And
1.8 million here in Australia.
Right. So in those particular cases, there's a lot of opportunity in there. I mean, it's here in the United States, $10 trillion worth of business value that's going to need to change hands. But we don't have that kind of capital to buy businesses, as you might imagine, especially nowadays. So the great businesses are going to get noticed, and the good businesses, I'm afraid, are going to get lost. And so you really have to work hard on managing what we're calling your acquisition attractiveness, right? And I mentioned earlier that it was about kind of staging the business for a high-value transition, right? So that's really about paying attention to your strategic marketplace, which is going to be your peers who may be competitors, or they may be synergistic strategic businesses that may end up getting interested in you. You've got to communicate your position, your successes, and you really got to develop and defend your place in the market in order to make sure you get noticed and kind of cut through that market noise. And I think that also telegraphs, very importantly, that you know what matters to a potential buyer. You're looking at it from their point of view rather than just your own.
I always tell my clients, you need to think like a buyer when you're building your business, because one day you will want to sell and you'll be hoping to appeal to a buyer. So what does a buyer want? And if you can build your business in that way, you'll make it more attractive. Particularly in that crowded market that you speak about. I mean, to put an Australian dollar amount on it's $4.3 trillion worth of business about to change hands. So it's significant even here.
Right, right. Yeah, and I mean, there's not just a microeconomic motivation for the business owners and the industries around which those businesses are built, but there's also a macroeconomic situation in everywhere that this is taking place, in that, most business owners, probably 85% of business owners say that they need the money from the sale of their business or the transition of their business in order to retire in the way that they've planned. The economy here in the United States is based, 73, 74% on consumer spending.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this unprecedented demographic distortion moving through the system, and every single one of those business owners, are very, 8 out of 10, let's say, are reporting that they need that capital, which is probably 90 to 95% of their net worth, which is locked away in their business. They're not prepared to transfer it. They really haven't done any planning. They don't really know what the business is worth, and they may have completely unrealistic expectations around that, so they're lacking information. They don't really understand what affects business value, what they can do, how they can participate in enhancing it. And so they're in a very weak negotiating position, unfortunately, and made weaker by the very crowded marketplace. So there's a lot at stake. And yet, here in the U.S., again, only about 9%, 10% of business owners say they have a formal exit plan. And maybe another 30% say they've got something informal and verbal, which I really don't know what to make of that, honestly. And then, the majority, 65% of the marketplace, or 55, whatever the remainder is, don't have any plan at all, and they think it's just too early. No matter what age they are, they just think it's too early. They'll handle it later.
Well, it's interesting to note
risk in that, obviously.
that most people I meet initially believe that succession planning is only something you do when you're aged, when you're ready to retire. But there's a number of factors that can force a business owner out prior, and having your business built in a way that's valuable and attractive to a potential buyer as early on in the piece is really crucial to making sure you benefit with all the profits you'd hoped for.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a lot. I've been surprised, actually. We began our business here thinking on the succession and exit planning side that we would be dealing mostly with people who were in the retirement category, the retirement age category. We have a lot of clients who are in their 40s who are running great businesses, and they use succession and exit planning as a strategic planning tool. So they're doing exactly what we're recommending doing here, acquisition attractiveness. They're already starting to manage that positioning, even though they may not be looking at that transaction, whatever it may be, for another 15 or 20 years. That shows a huge amount of foresight. In my book, I give them a very high grade for managers, and I also give them a very high chance of actually getting what they deserve to get out of their business at the time that they want. They're in control of this process.
Sean, we're running really close to time. I'd like to just ask this one question. What exactly changes market value for a business?
Well, we've talked about really the three things that can affect market value, but let me give you my view on the one thing that you could do today, which I think is enlightening, educational, and empowering, and it makes an immediate difference in the way that you think about business value. And that is, and it may seem like a little bit of a circular argument here, but if you want to drive a higher business value, get your business valued. I have seen time and time again that once the business owner is educated about what makes or breaks their business's value, they're no longer passive about it. So what I've seen is that a lot of owners kind of think that business value is something that an independent professional just hands to them on a piece of paper, and it's too remote. It doesn't have anything to do with them because they haven't really learned, or no one has sat down and talked to them about what levers are important, what they can actually do to participate in that process. So in order for it to be successful, first of all, you have to get the information and understand what's going on. Second, you have to shift your viewpoint from being a passive part of this to being an active partner in value enhancement. And once you get your business valued, that light bulb begins to go off. And it's a really tectonic shift that dramatically changes the strategy and also the decision making. I've seen overnight almost, after a business valuation, the processes and the decision making at the executive level completely change because their perspectives have shifted. So it's not just how will we do it, as it has been in the past, but the question really becomes, is what we're about to do going to build the value of our business? Those are two dramatically different questions, two dramatically different perspectives. So all of a sudden, this, what we call a disciplined culture of value creation, begins to emerge. And it begins to emerge, it gets pushed down from the executive level into all levels of the company. So now they're tying their actions to the creation of business value, and they're seeing that all of that holistic approach, the ecosystem, is about discipline and actual performance, right? Objective performance. Once that seed is planted, then the company is going to grow into a winner. It's going to shift to the top tier. Confident of that. So
Sean,
that's my advice. Get your business valued.
Sean, thanks so much for this. Now, I know we've only had enough time to briefly cover the key levers that will make the difference for our audience's business valuation. And in a minute, we're going to give our audience a chance to learn more about how they can boost their business valuation. But right now, can we just revise what we've covered today for our audience? The first of these was we revealed the levers you can actually control to maximize your business valuation. We've identified the...
That's right.
Did you want
Go
to...
ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to ask you, we've identified...
So we had the...
Sean, we've lost you.
Go ahead.
Are you there?
No, I'm here.
Okay. We've talked about the 6 risk factors that you'll want to overcome, and according to you, these are absolutely crucial in boosting the valuation of your business, that it's the platform from which
That's
all
correct.
is factored in on valuation.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the 3 proven methods to increase your business earnings, and we've uncovered the 5 ways to increase your business acquisition attractiveness. And we've talked about the one incredibly simple thing you can do immediately to dramatically boost your business valuation, which was to get your business valued. Because once you go through the process, you really have the ability to understand those levers and what will make the difference. Now, Sean, you've revealed so many great tips today, and I thank you for that. But I know our audience are keen to know more and what they can do to get started. So what's the next step from here on in?
Well, we are going to, we have an offer for the audience. So we are going to introduce a new webinar in the near future, within the next month, that is going to be on this area of risk reduction, which is increasing your activities of economic value. And we'll get into that. That's going to be actually about a 2-hour webinar, because it's a fairly complex area, but it's very interesting stuff. We also have an ebook that will be part of the package, which is a consumer awareness guide to succession planning. We have developed a business value health check that everyone can, for the first 7 registrations, you'll get online access to that, and that comes, there are 10 questions, and you'll get a free customized report. And we'll also give you the activity workbook, which is will help you identify the areas of your business that are going to boost its valuation. So the total value for those things at a retail price is $437, roughly $438, and we are making those available for $197, so it's a great deal. And then in addition to that, we'll add free online access to the recording of today's webinar, which we would normally offer for $97. So that's $535 roughly of value for $197.
Okay, and for our listeners, anybody who would like to take advantage of this offer, we'd urge you to do it today, because we're making those the first 7 registrations to receive the extra value, you just need to go to this link and we'll send you an email with that link so you can click online to buy it. It's a simple matter of you'll need a credit card to pay and go online. Now, we'd like to open up to the audience to ask questions. So I'm going to unmute the lines. Or if you could type your questions in down below, and we'd be happy to answer questions.
Anything else going on there? After on the conference call. Hi.
So if you've got questions, just please type them down here in the
So I
box
see that
below.
Sam has asked how we met, Lee.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we met at Chicago University when I was doing the MBA intensive program provided by the Institute of Exit Planning in Chicago, Illinois, earlier this year. And that's when Sean was one of the lecturers there, and I actually spent some time in his practice after the course so that I could see how he's doing things. Does that answer your question, Sam? Would anyone else like to ask any questions? Did we hit on any hot buttons today? Oh, we've got a shy group, Sean. Oh, hang on, there's a comment here. Thank you, Lee and Sean. Very useful to, especially the tip about increasing valuation by getting a business valuation. Okay, thanks, Karen.
So Karen also has a question about what we're going to cover specifically in the next webinar.
Ah, yes.
So I can. That's a good question, Karen. And so let me just sort of preview the creation of economic value in a business by saying that a lot of businesses, this is an example, a lot of businesses are doing, let's say, 10 things, right? And they sort of lump all 10 things together into one business. But from experience, I can tell you that most of the time, at least, there may be 2 of those 10 things that are actually creating economic value. And economic value is actually a measure of how much equity is being created for the shareholders in the business, the owners. So it's separate from the creation of profit. It's actually a different kind of metric. It has to do with what it costs you, what your cost of capital is, and all those kinds of things. So it's an interesting calculation. But most businesses really don't have the ability to track those separate activities in a way that gives them insight into which ones are detracting from the economic value, the business value, and which ones are actually supporting it and driving it up. So the idea here is to learn how to do that in a way that it's insightful for your business, and then you'll have a tool and have the ability to reinvest or invest further in the things that are actually creating economic value for you and stop immediately doing the things that are detracting from your value. So that's kind of a preview. It gets a whole lot deeper than that. I will boil it down in a way that is not boring, I promise, because it can definitely get boring, even for me. But we're gonna have a lot of fun with it because I think we'll be able to talk about some case studies, and you should walk away with a higher level of confidence in how to actually look at your business through that lens.
Okay, if I could just add something to that too, Sean. We're actually going to help attendees to maximise the business valuation by controlling the levers that will affect it. And we'll actually show people how to overcome the 6 risk factors that they're facing, including the specific risks of their industry. We're going to increase business earnings by adding the most economic value, and that's going to be done by looking at the factors that do increase economic value in your particular industry. We're going to get the business on track to boost the valuation and provide them with the financial security they've always dreamed of. So there's certainly a lot to be gained by signing on to the program, which is, for today, $197. Now, someone else, Anne Gordon, has asked a question. She wants to know how you get business owners excited about going through the exit planning process. Well, Anne, the way I would answer that is you've got to appeal to people in a way that they feel excited about their business, and business valuation is something that business owners get really excited about. Everybody wants to know how to grow their business, and so the reason why they want to grow their business is they hope to one day leave and sell it for a profit. So that's the way I think it works. It's a bit like selling a funeral plan. Nobody wants to organise their funeral even though they're going to die. So just talking about the end bit's not very exciting at all, and that's why you might be having trouble getting people involved in it. Does that answer your question, Anne? Is there anything else? Anybody else that wants to make a comment or ask a question? We've had all the girls asking questions today. The guys are a little bit shy. Did you find that in the US, Sean?
Well, no.
Aussie guys don't like to talk much.
No.
Okay, well, if nobody else has anything else they want to ask online.
Actually, Lee, we just got a good question from
Oh,
Chen.
Chen Tan, great. Yes, I see that. Would you like to handle this one? Chen is asking.
Yeah, I'd be glad. So Chen's asking, is there a very significant valuation difference between a business that has a couple of large customers compared to many small customers? So that's a really good question, Chen. And the simple answer, if there is one, is that yes, there can be. And here's how I would say it. If you have customers that represent more than 25% of your total revenue base, sometimes even less than that, say between 10 and 25% or up, then there's obviously a risk that if one or more of those customers decides to leave your company, then your revenue and presumably your profit will suffer, because in order to serve those customers, you may have increased your infrastructure, so you're probably taking on more costs because they're bigger, and so you've sort of staffed up or upgraded your manufacturing, spent money on that. It may be capital expenditures or it may be ongoing costs. So you're servicing that customer. If they pull out, you're left with a void. That's going to affect your financials dramatically. So that's why buyers or investors in a business are really concerned about it. Now, what's the effect on value? I would say that the value of a business, the difference is probably about I would say a 20% discount. So if you've got a $10 million value business and there is a customer concentration problem, let's think of it as a $2 million hit, and that is worth managing.
Does that answer your question, Chen? Okay, great. Thank you. Chen's just answered yes. Okay, we've still got quite a few people online. We've got George and Anne, John Totaro, Justin Landy, Leon, Linda, Sam, Stephen, and Wally. Surely you've got some questions swimming around in your mind there that you'd like to ask. So if you're feeling a bit shy and you'd like to ask questions later, you can always send us an email and we will get back to you that way. So if nobody else has anything else to ask, I'm going to wrap this up right now. Thank you very much for attending today. We've enjoyed spending the time working to help you understand what you need to do to increase and boost your business valuation. Please check your inbox. Oh, hang on. Oh, okay. Linda's just sent a message saying thanks very kindly and no questions. Ciao for now. Okay, so please check your inbox. We'll send you an email with the details of our offer. If you'd like to take your business to the next step, we'd be really happy to work with you. So thanks very much, and thank you very much today, Sean, for coming to speak to us here in Australia.
My pleasure, Lee. I'm delighted to do it and look forward to the next webinar.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, we're going to sign out, everybody.